Peoria City Council will now come to order. Please rise for a moment of quiet reflection and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Patena.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will please call the roll.
Mayor Carlett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Binsbacher. Here. Councilmember Patena.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Hunt. Here. Councilmember Leone.
Here.
Council Liaison Helt.
Here.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Peoria City Council meeting of April 7th, 2015. This is the final call to submit speaker request forms. If anyone would like to address an issue that is on the agenda, or if you would like to speak regarding a non-agenda item, we have speaker request forms available in the lobby, or you can request them from the city clerk. If you give us a little bit of information, you will be recognized at the appropriate time. The first item on the agenda is a presentation. It is fiscal year 2016 recommended budget books. Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Mayor Carlett and council members. It's my privilege this evening to present to you our proposed 2016 fiscal year budget. And I really want to begin by underscoring my appreciation to the staff leadership team and the budget staff who put this together. As you know from previous discussions on the budget, we build our budget in a collaborative fashion. The staff leadership team really work in harmony and in concert with one another in putting together the budget that I'm presenting to you now. I also want to thank Katie and her staff for the very hard work that they put in analyzing thousands of proposals and ideas and going over all of the material and data that are used in putting together the budget books, which we have in a cart here that are available for you at the end of the session to take home and begin studying the book for the sessions next week. And I know from past experience you will read that book from cover to cover. And we're also available to help you, particularly those of you that are new to the council, in making sure that we're presenting it as clearly as possible and answering all of your questions. So, of course, we begin with your leadership. On January 31st, the council we gave to the council an economic outlook that provided you with the basis for your leadership to us through the financial overview on February 3rd, and ultimately your council policy goals, which you met and created just a couple of weeks ago. You have those now before you. I put them here on the screen. But we have put the detail of the council policies in front of you, and I really want to thank you again for the thoughtful work that you put into giving us these important policy goals. What we do with these policy goals is use them in creating the budget and the work plans of the department. And that's very important in our form of government. The alignment between you as the elected officials and the staff is critically important. You set the direction. It's your goals that we follow, and that's what we've used in putting the budget together. The foundations of the budget are presented in this slide. We always bring to bear our financial policies, those key policies that underpin everything that we do. We have strong reserves. We have high bond ratings. We work within our means, and we have a long-range perspective that we take on the budget each year. And we always recognize the Peoria economy, not just the national economy and the state economy, but we drill down into our specific economy. What you see here are our recommended themes and objectives within the budget. We always work to maintain our financial integrity. In this year's budget, we're enhancing public safety. We're enhancing and expanding our economic development program. We're balancing our service delivery across the city, particularly to meet the growing needs of the area in the northern part of the city. We're maintaining our existing assets. Those are the built assets and owned assets of the city. It's very important that we always maintain our assets, not simply build new ones. We continue to invest in our workforce. We have an extremely talented workforce across all of our departments, and planning for and enhancing the development and growth of our employees is critically important. We always keep a customer focus orientation within the city. One of the hallmarks of the city of Peoria is our excellent customer service, and we keep that paramount. And finally, and importantly, we provide great value for the tax dollars that we give, and we keep a low tax burden. Some of the major enhancements within this budget fall in line with your priorities. First of all, public safety. In the area of police protection, we're continuing to fund our award-winning community-oriented policing program. We're adding 2 new police officers and a new crime scene technician. In our fire area, we're adding 2 firefighters out of the general fund, but importantly, we're expanding that by 4 firefighters that we're anticipating to be funded by a federal grant. And as you know from these grants that we've received in the past, those grants cover 2 years of the cost of those employees, and then the city picks up the rest of the cost going forward. So it's built into our long-range expenditure plans, but it's a very good way for us to increase our force using some available federal dollars. So in the end, we'll have 6 firefighters if we're successful in getting this grant. We're also adding a fire inspector and investigator, and we're continuing to train our firefighters in paramedic service. As you know from previous budgets, increasing our paramedic training is important to the firefighters, and we're training 6 more this coming year with additional anticipated for years to come. And finally, in this area, we're enhancing the safety equipment of our firefighters. This item, the last item on the screen in front of you, is for new turnout gear for the firefighters and improvements in some of our facilities to help them avoid contact with potentially dangerous chemicals. In fires today, there's a lot of chemical material that is released from fire retardant treatments, and there's chemicals there that we want to protect our firefighters from. This equipment investment will help us do that. Another high priority for the council has been economic development. We're expanding our economic development program. We're adding a position within our economic development department to help implement your increased emphasis in this area. We're also adding marketing and promotion resources by way of 1 position and some additional funding. We're also adding consultant services to help us in the land consulting area that will augment the staff and provide us an ability to bring on resources as necessary as we've done in other areas where we use consultant services. Also in support of our economic development program, we're adding a senior planner because to bring sites into a shovel-ready condition, as you talked about in your workshop, it's going to necessitate our need to do land entitlement work, potential rezone work in other areas that are suited for a planner, and this will be in our community development department. Finally, is an improvement in our permitting function. We're adding an applications specialist. As most of you know, in the last couple of years, we've expanded our online application process for permitting, and there's an attendant requirement for additional IT support, and this position will enable us to continue to provide a higher level of service as permit activity is expected to increase over the next few years. Another high priority for the council is quality of life, and we're expanding several of our programs to meet that objective. First of all, our Community Works program, and for those of you that have not had the pleasure of reading through these books yet, this is one of the areas that you'll find in there that are the smaller community projects, not the large capital projects, but smaller projects within neighborhoods that really enhance the quality of life for citizens. We have found these projects to be very popular and a nice way for us to really get into a community without having to do a major capital project, but do some enhancements that the people really like. In that as well, we have added the community gardens proposal that was discussed at your recent workshop and are funding that as we discussed there a couple of weeks ago. We're continuing our neighborhood investments as a quality of life enhancement in the community. We're increasing our funding for some recreation programs and some of our community events, which have proven to be very popular at community building and as a quality of life feature for our residents. And we are also increasing funding for our human services program. In the quality of life initiative category, and this of course was a significant part of the discussion at your recent workshop, is looking long-term at an initiative that can really bring to bear some of the larger assets of the community in terms of open space and major park facilities and trails for the expanding city. We're putting some funding in the budget to make sure that we're working with you on the creation and ultimately the implementation of this program as well. In the area of workforce planning, we have funded our compensation and benefit program in a way that makes sure that we meet the needs of our employees in terms of keeping them competitive in all of the different markets that they're in. As you know, and since I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, our employees are absolutely the most important thing in our service delivery, and we need to continue to take care of our employees as we've done in the past, and we have put compensation and benefit dollars in the budget to do that. We've expanded our training and development. You'll recall that in the downturn we did reduce some of our expenditures in the training and staff development area. We're beginning to bring those dollars back into the budget, and you'll see some increases in the budget for that. Similarly, in terms of what we talked about last year, we're also focusing a lot more on leadership development and management training for our employees that want to see promotions. Not every employee wants a promotion, and that's fine. But for those that do, we want to make sure that we're helping them prepare for promotional opportunities as they become available. And finally, again, reflective of your direction from your workshop, we're beginning the Human Capital Strategic Plan process, and our Human Resources Director, Julie Ayers, will be leading that with the staff and council going forward. In the area of capital projects, this, of course, is one of the most significant features of the budget of a growing city. And we have been extremely successful over the years in having a 10-year funded capital improvement program. This budget continues that. We have our significant Community Park 3 in the budget for planning, site identification, and ultimately construction. We are focusing on open space and land acquisition. We're completing the public safety facility expansion of our Pinnacle Peak facility, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago. We have our economic development projects funded, and we're putting some dollars in our water utility area to make sure that we have water treatment capacity coming online as new development in the northern part of the city is happening. We're going to have enough water to make sure that we can serve that area as growth picks up. And finally, of course, as always, there's transportation and roadway projects funded within our capital improvement program. In the area of utilities, we are returning to the fundamental principles of sound financial management that have guided us so well. And to do that, we will need a multi-year rate process in the neighborhood of about 2.5% per year to get us on track. And we'll be setting some rates to recover the operating expansion costs of our reclaimed water system. In the area of solid waste, we have a roll-off pull fee adjustment that we'll be recommending, and in response to the council's direction, we're adding a residential bulk trash pickup for next year as well. Just a couple of minor organizational changes, but important ones. most notably in our area of economic development. As some of you will recall, when in the downturn, we combined our permitting function with our economic development function, and this worked real well at that time. It helped our permitting staff in terms of understanding the private sector development needs, and it was one of the cost-cutting and job-saving endeavors that we undertook in the downturn. Now that we're seeing permitting activity pick up again, it makes a lot of sense to take that function back and put it in with engineering. It will allow them to be supported by a department that is focused on growth and development. And importantly, it allows our economic development department to be singularly focused on economic development, again, as we've discussed in our recent workshops. Finally, as you all know, we have recently restructured the city manager's office and council support office and brought them together into one unit, which I think is functioning real well. So you see the mayor and council support, leadership and management of the city, our intergovernmental affairs, sustainability, and strategic support, all working in harmony in the support of leadership of the city. So just in summary, before I turn it over to Ms. Gregory, we have a balanced budget. It supports your priorities. It maintains our core services and service levels. There are no tax increases. It restores appropriate utility funding. It invests in our workforce and has modest increases in ongoing and one-time service additions, and it continues our balanced and effective capital improvement program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gregory, who can give you some numbers and graphs to go with my narrative.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Yes, so Carl got to provide you kind of an overview of what's included in the budget. I'm going to spend a little bit of time giving you an overview of sort of the budget by the numbers. So budget development in Peoria really it begins with our budget policy framework that's established in the city's principles of sound financial management. And what you see on this slide are the key budget policy guidelines that set the stage for us developing a recommended budget to council. And each year, we update our 5-year long-range financial forecast, and that incorporates both revenue and expenditure estimates for all of the city's major operating funds. And this includes revenues that are anticipated to be sustainable or recurring over the 5-year forecast, and all of the known or anticipated ongoing expenditure requirements as well. And then, of course, we always make sure that we've met all of our reserve requirements as established by policy and apply any balance above reserves to one-time uses in subsequent years. We don't apply those to any ongoing requirements. Just as a quick recap, we have 2 processes that go on during the budget development each year. The first one is the operating budget process, and that is, the operating budget is what really obviously supports our day-to-day operational needs. It's primarily funded through our fees and taxes and rates that we charge to our users or to our citizens to help support many of those typical activities such as public safety, administration of the city, city management, all of those types of things. We also have a capital budget development that is used to really support kind of our large one-time capital needs. And in that, we go through a process of identifying all those capital needs and capital requirements, what are the available funding sources, how should we apply those funding sources to the various projects, and those are primarily funded through, as you can see on here, bonds or impact fees or rates. Pushing the wrong thing here. This is our budget process. You may have seen this before, those of you who have been on the council. For those who are new, this may be new to you, but usually around September, October timeframe, we're preparing and updating all of our forecasts for the fiscal year. We usually like to get to council around December or January to get a mid-year review with council and get some council direction at that time. This year, of course, we had to get that a little bit later in the process. Departments through the months of November through January were completing and developing their department budget requests and brought that forward to the budget office for our review. We then meet with our leadership team and our executive leadership to collaboratively come up with the priorities within the budget and identify where those needs are and talk about trade-offs and talk about services and service delivery and operations. And with that, we go through what we call a balancing process where we ensure that we have all the right revenues to support the right expenditures and bring that forward to our executive leadership, who then puts that together as part of the recommended budget. And then, of course, you'll be spending some time with us over the next couple of weeks as we review all that's in this budget during our council budget study sessions. This just gives you a quick overview of the budget history for the past 10 years. And you can see on here our total recommended budget for fiscal year 2016 is $511 million. That does show it as an 8.72% increase over the prior year. Much of that is associated with increases in our capital program, the first year of our capital program. So we have about $24 million increase in our capital program just in the first year or just in fiscal year 16. The budget for the general fund, which is the city's primary operating fund, is $131.2 million, and that's a 6.5% increase. And $169.3 million is in there for the capital budget, and that represents, like I mentioned before, a 16.59% increase over the 2015 plan. So tonight I'd like to just give a quick overview of a financial overview of a number of the city's major operating funds, and we'll start with the city's general fund, which is one that we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on. In developing our five-year forecast, we start by looking at our revenues, and this chart shows the different types of revenues that support the general fund. It's important to understand where these revenues come from and the factors that impact each of these sources. And if you look at this pie chart, you can see that approximately 2/3 between our city sales tax and our state shared revenue come from those two areas. And why is that important? Of course, it's important because these, at times, can be a volatile source of revenue, and they are closely tied to consumer spending. So, as we see changes in that, we're looking at each of those individual sales tax categories and trying to understand, as Carl mentioned earlier, the Peoria economy in relationship to the state economy, in relationship to the national economy. We receive revenues from fees and charges, as you can see on here, such as recreation fees and development services fees. These help offset some of the individual costs and also help diversify our revenue base. Also, in the general fund are what we call internal service charges, such as human resources, city attorney, city clerk, city management, those types of departments. These services get charged out to all the other operating funds in the organization and are therefore included as part of our overall revenue for the general fund. And then you'll just see that tiny little sliver on the side there of property tax. I'd like to mention that from time to time, especially for our viewing audience who maybe come from other parts of the country. Our property tax is really a very small portion of our general fund revenues, and that's different than maybe you see in other parts of the country. Looking at the expenditure side, you can see by service area here that public safety makes up over 50% of the general fund operating budget. That makes sense. They're a very big operation, and it's one of our primary objectives as a city to provide that type of service to our residents. Community services, as you see on here, also has a significant portion. However, as I just mentioned, a lot of those expenditures are offset by revenues that we receive for programs and activities that people enjoy in our city. And then it's also where we house a number of the city's administrative services, as you can see on here. And these services are used citywide. So again, just like we get revenues, on the revenue side, we allocate these costs out to other departments as well. So when we look at the expenditures here, you can see on this chart that much of the costs are associated with personnel. So when we talk about the general fund, 72% of the general fund expenditures are related to personnel. Makes sense, service-oriented. Our people are what provide the services to our citizens. So it makes sense of that. About just under 25% is in the contractual. So on the personnel side, as you can see here, that really just reflects compensation benefits and retirement contributions. The contractual can be a variety of things. I've outlined a few things on here, such as our grounds repair and maintenance, which are right-of-way contract, all of that, our water and electricity costs, professional services, jail fees. The list could go on, and I have them here if you're interested. But a number of things fall under that contractual category. We like to show this to give you a sense of really what we are doing when we're developing a 5-year forecast. So again, it's prudent financial management to look more long-term than just the year ahead. So each year we put together a forecast for our major operating funds, and this is our forecast on the expenditure side for the general fund. So these green bars represent what we know and understand as our ongoing requirements for the general fund. So included, you can see the moderate expenditure growth in here, which is primarily driven by personnel costs, as I mentioned before, compensation, employee health benefits, and retirement contributions. So that's what's included in those green bars. Additionally, in those green bars, you'll see things like any operating impacts associated with our capital improvement program. So when the city is undertaking a capital improvement process, we also look at the operating expenses associated with that project and what that's going to mean to the various funds in the city, but in this case, what it means to the general fund. Will we have to take on will we have ongoing maintenance costs associated with that? Will we have operating expenditures associated with that improvement? So we also look at those, and that helps prioritize decision-making as well in our capital improvement program. Council also has approved the set compensation packages with our labor groups. That's included in here, as well as commensurate amounts for our non-represented employees, and those are shown within each year of the forecast. One of the things I just wanted to mention here, in relationship to the city's CIP and operating costs, an example of that, because it's going to come up a little bit later, is when we take on the Community Park 3. When that park becomes a city asset and we start operating that facility, we're going to have operating impacts associated with that. That is in these bars here, and there's about $1 million. Currently, we're estimating about $1 million operating impact. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but you'll understand what that means to our one-time fund analysis. So now this line here overlays what we think and what we believe are our revenue projections. And again, these are projections of the recurring revenues that we believe we're going to receive each year. Those sources, as I mentioned before, state shared revenues, cities, local sales tax, all of the different types of revenues that we believe we're going to receive. And there, you can see there's not much of a gap there in between those two lines, and this means really that the general fund is limited in its ability to support new ongoing expenditures. And the analysis that we did showed that we had approximately, if you look across all 5 years, and you understand what's in each of those bars and what's in each of those lines, we showed that we had approximately $600,000 available to support new ongoing budget requests after accounting for personnel costs and the costs related to the CIP operating. You'll see how we allocated those, and Carl mentioned some of those in his presentation already, but you'll see how we allocated those ongoing dollars in the budget document. The second piece that we look at, of course, is our one-time fund analysis, and we always review the available one-time funding. And each year we expect that we're going to have some one-time funding that will be available, and it becomes available really for 3 primary reasons. The first reason is that we may receive one-time revenues from outside sources, or we may, maybe we had a recovery, or we had something where we recovered some funds, or if we have revenues that are in excess of our budget estimates, that would generate some one-time available funding. And an example of that would be our construction sales tax. The prudent thing to do is that we set a baseline sustainable amount for our construction sales tax. What we don't want to do is be caught up in a situation where every year as growth increases and the number of units that we develop increases, we keep squeaking up that number and apply those dollars to ongoing uses, and then have what happened during our downturn, which is all of that went away, and have a big gap that we got to deal with in ongoing and structural deficit. So we budget a sustainable amount, an amount that we believe we will receive on every single year, and anything above that amount in any given year, we bring back and use as one-time expenses in our budget development. A second way that we receive one-time expenditures are if we have expenditure savings or operational efficiencies. Those could come in a number of forms, including position vacancies. Maybe positions haven't been filled for some time. We have some vacancies in those positions. We have some salary savings, or adjustments in our projected compensation. So when we look out at the forecast, we project some compensation. We have compensation assumptions in there. If for some reason the ultimate compensation is less, then we have some savings on any given year. And then third reason is what I talked about before, is that planning for future expenditures, such as with Community Park 3. So We don't have Community Park 3 coming online until fiscal year 18 in terms of operating expenditures. It'll be built in 17, operating expenditures in 18. So we know we can't program those ongoing dollars today. We've got to be sure that we'll have them when we need them in fiscal year 18 to support that project. So we have a little bit of one time in the first few years of the forecast to be able to apply, we look at that each year, and each year we'll come back to you with that analysis. So in this year's analysis, we identified about $6.8 million in one-time available funding. You can see here how we allocated that across the budget. We put about $1.8 million into general fund CIP projects. Those are projects that help support our capital improvement program. We use some general fund one-time to support those. That typically is for projects where maybe there isn't really an appropriate funding source, such as bonds or some of those others, or impact fees. Those have certain requirements as to how you use them, but general fund you can use for that. So we allocated some there. In our repair and maintenance projects, we set aside about $1.5 million this year to help support some of those important assets that we have as a city that we need to continue to ensure we have the ability to keep them to the level where they need to be, and those are in the areas of community services, facilities, and in the case of our IT department, some of our network infrastructure. So we've allocated some dollars in the budget to those areas. Additionally, we allocated $800,000 to our Community Works program. Carl mentioned this. This is a slightly higher amount than what we've done in prior years. So that's allowing us to do a few more of those neighborhood investments, small neighborhood investments. And then the balance of that was, you'll see in your budget book, spread across some of the department requests where they submit requests for use of one-time money to help support their departmental objectives. So you'll see those in your budget book as well. So I want to take just a minute to talk a little bit about our half-cent sales tax fund, because that's another major operating fund for the city. The expenditures in the half-cent sales tax fund are set by your council policy. And within the policy guidelines, they fund certain operational functions such as public safety, economic development, and the sports complex. They also support development agreement payments and debt service on the city's Center for Performing Arts, and obviously the recent stadium and clubhouse improvements that we've done out at the sports complex. Per council's direction, this fund has been identified as the primary funding source for our economic development initiatives and projects. The proposed budget does include some funding for new staffing and operational support, as Carl had mentioned, to advance our economic development programs and initiatives. And going forward, we do anticipate there is some capacity within this fund. We've mentioned this before to council. What we believe that will do is enable us to deal with, as those projects come up, as those important economic development projects comes up, we have some ability to address some of those projects and have some funding to be able to do that. And just as a side note, in the appendix of your workbook, for those of you who are new to council and maybe want some history, we've included the history of the half-cent sales tax in there, which gives you kind of an overview of all of the different, since the inception of the half-cent sales tax, some of the policy development, as well as some of the uses and kind of how we've continued that. So it's a fun read if you're weird like me, I guess. I'd like to talk a little bit about transportation funds. As you know, I don't have a pretty chart for this one, but we have a very significant street system in Peoria. We're very long and linear. We have to have a lot of miles of roadway in order to be able to serve our residents. And so we have not only a maturing system, but we also have a growing system. So we have a lot of needs kind of pushing and pulling and tugging in all areas. And so we have the Streets Fund, which is primarily supported through our HERF revenues, and that's the gas tax, basically. And that supports a number of our street maintenance and traffic engineering operations. And right now, when we look at the street, we look at all these funds every year. I want to assure you of that. And right now, as we look at it, we continue to have the ability to support the operating and capital requirements within our street funds. And if we ever anticipate that we'll have any issue there, we will certainly make sure that council's aware of that. But as of now, that fund is doing just fine. The city's transit operations, which is our Dial-A-Ride, is funded through lottery proceeds. And that we receive, and then it also receives a subsidy from our transportation sales tax fund, which I'll talk about in a minute. We do continue to watch this. Obviously, lottery proceeds can go up or down, depending, and certainly are subject to the whims possibly of the state. So we want to ensure that we have the ability to continue those services and those programs, and that enables us, the subsidy enables us to do that. The third area is in the Transportation Sales Tax Fund, and that supports a number of our transportation-related capital projects, and you've seen a lot of those over the years, a lot of intersection improvements in the city. We've used that to finance the Happy Valley Road improvements. It also pays for a lot of our street maintenance in the city. So as you look at our arterial street maintenance, that's included in there. And one of the council's goals was to look at the fixed route or the circulator. And so just to be assured, within the transportation sales tax fund, each year we have what I'd call a set-aside or an allocation for just that, about $1 million. Now, when we don't spend that, we put that towards other one-time uses to help support our transportation needs. But if at any point we want to use that for a circulator or some sort of fixed route, we have the ability to do that. That wasn't what I meant to do. There we go. Thanks. All right, so let me talk a little bit about our enterprise funds. We are going to have some opportunity to talk a lot about this during the budget process. So we have a whole, part of one of our days is available to talk through this. But generally, in the water and wastewater side, the current forecast does call for some rate adjustments of about 2.5% per year for an average residential user over the next 3 years. And so, as you know, we have not adjusted our water or wastewater rates for the last 2 years, and we do look forward to reviewing all of that information with you, and we have lots of information, and I hope you're ready to learn a lot and to hear a lot from us on that. The financial outlook for the Residential Solid Waste Fund remains strong. We recently implemented, as you know, the same-day pickup for trash and recycling. The council has also indicated an interest in the bulk trash, and as Carl mentioned, we are incorporating that into the budget. There is some strain on the Commercial Solid Waste Fund, and I just want to make council aware of that. Commercial solid waste services include commercial solid waste and recycling, roll-off services, and front-load services. We've spent a lot of time in the past talking with councils about how this line of business is subject to sort of the market and competitiveness within the market. Recently, just this last week, it was the governor signed the bill that will make it so that the city is not able to, so that multifamilies will be able to be out for competitive bid, And so currently the city of Peoria serves all multifamily in the city. Now that that is out there, it's not an immediate impact to the city, but over time it will continue, we will start losing some of those multifamily accounts where we can't compete. And we'll need to continue to look at our commercial solid waste services and what that means from a long-range perspective. Okay. That's the fund overview. I want to just spend a quick moment talking a little bit about some of the FTE changes in the fiscal year 16 budget. We've talked about a lot of these already, but you can see here that number of positions to support two of your significant council goals, which are in public safety and economic development. You can see those there. Additionally, we have some positions here that are rate supported to address growth in the city and operational requirements in our rate supported funds. I did it again. And lastly, wanted to just share, there's a handful of positions that are revenue offset or what we call no cost due to reorganizations in departments and things like that. So those are listed on here as well, or are grant funded. Switching gears, one quick slide on our capital improvement program. The 10-year capital budget is $645.8 million, and this is about a 7.9% increase on the 10-year plan. You can see here, as I've talked about, water, wastewater, and streets continue to have a heavy infrastructure requirement. Economic development remains a significant category in here. This includes our second phase of P83, a variety of the economic development projects such as Trine, Maxwell, a number of those that we've already entered into agreements with, and also the funding for the parking structure on the west end of the sports complex parking lot. And then we also will be, we'll be having a pretty significant conversation about the capital improvement program over the next couple of weeks, with Andy providing you a lot of pictures and information about projects and what we plan to be doing. And these are just kind of the overview of that. Let's see, as we developed our budget, we did pay close attention to those things that you told us during your council budget or council goal setting. And we hope that this budget addresses most of those priorities, or many of those priorities. We do have a number of topics we'd like to discuss with you. I've got these listed on here. These are the proposed dates and the topics for the upcoming meetings. As you can see, we have a number of things that we want to get through in those dates. For those of you who are returning, who are new or returning to the council, your workbook right here will serve as the primary source of information for your city budget study sessions. And it's divided up, just for your information, the workbook is divided up by departments, and that's really to provide more of a logical pathway through the book so you know kind of what you're looking for. And in addition to the traditional budget numbers and expenditure details, the beginning of each department section includes a description of services or functions that are provided by each department, and included in that is a cost of service analysis and a performance report. I really hope that you spend some time reading through that. That gives you kind of all of your baseline information about what that department is about and what they're trying to achieve with the dollars that they have. And very quickly, I'd like to acknowledge our budget office staff who worked very hard to develop, review, and compile this information. They're all sitting, well, most of them are sitting over here. And also the department directors and the budget liaisons in the departments who we really do rely on to ensure that we deliver a complete and accurate budget to you. If at any time over the next couple of weeks you have any questions about the budget, you have any items you'd like to discuss ahead of the meetings, please feel free to contact me or anyone in the budget office or Carl, and we will be happy to sit down with you and go over any of the information. I'll stop talking now. Happy reading.
Thank you, Katie. That was great. A lot of information. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for your patience in the presentation. And we look forward to meeting with you next week. And I would just underscore what Katie said. We are eager to meet with any of you anytime to talk about any questions you might have or background or information about the budget. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that 30,000-foot view. I mean, it was a great summary, a quick one. We are in for some big-time studying. We've got lots of budget sessions coming up. You saw the dates there. Members of the public, you are welcome. These are open meetings. Please come and join us. It is our goal in Peoria at all times to have a balanced budget, and we do so every single year. And you being part of the process is very important to us. So we hope that you'll come and join us, or you can just tune in on Channel 11. Thank you.
We'll have your books in the back for you if you want to take them this evening. If you don't, it's fine. You can leave them there. We'll get them to your offices.
Thank you. All right. The next item is the consent agenda. These are items listed on the agenda with a C. They are considered routine by the City Council or have been previously addressed by the Council. They will be passed by one motion unless a member of the City Council requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed by Council? Seeing none, is there a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Patena and seconded by Councilmember Hunt. Please vote. It's unanimous. We will now move on to new business, the regular agenda, item 21R, public hearing, liquor licenses, various locations. A new off-sale liquor license, Series 9 for Target number 2227, located at 24890 North Lake Pleasant Parkway. New restaurant liquor license, Series 12, for Angry Crab Shack Restaurant, located at 7608 West Cactus Road, number 110. And sampling privileges, Series 09S, to be added to the existing off-sale all liquor license, Series 9, for Walmart Supercenter, located at 21655 North Lake Pleasant Parkway. Staff report.
Brent Mattingly will make a brief report.
Thank you, Carl. These properties were all posted in accordance with the Arizona statutes. All reviewing departments of these applications recommend approval. The applicants paid all of their fees, and no comments have been received from the public on any of these licenses.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Mattingly? All right, seeing none, I declare this public hearing open. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to address this issue? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I declare this public hearing closed. Is there a motion on item 21R?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Leone, seconded by Vice Mayor Edwards. Council, please vote. Clerk will record your vote. It's unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item 22R. This is a public hearing. Code Amendment, Chapter 14, establishing regulatory standards governing donation recycling drop-off boxes. And we're ready for a staff report.
Chris Hawkes, our Planning Community Development Director, will make the staff report on this one.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Carlott, members of council. I'm pleased to present item 22R this evening. This is a proposed amendment to our zoning ordinance pertaining to new regulation for donation bin, or what we call drop-off boxes in the city. Now, this is a topic that has increasingly generated interest in the valley and also externally throughout the nation. In fact, today Glendale has initiated a process to look at donation bins. Surprise, council was continuing a discussion about donation bins. Phoenix adopted an ordinance a couple years ago, and here we are tonight to consider a potential amendment to our ordinance. This has also been a very visible topic for the council as we observe and deal with impacts in an unrestricted environment, and I'll talk about that. We currently do not have any requirements in our code dealing with donation bins. So in today's presentation, at a glance, what I'm going to talk about is what the definition of a donation box, what is the genesis of the amendment. I'll talk about the various components of the donation box ordinance. Next steps, because this is a new amendment. How will we unroll this amendment out to the community? And then finally, the recommended action tonight. But before I continue, I would like to recognize one member of our staff, Rick Williams. Rick, if you're in the audience, if you could raise your hand. He's one of my planners, and he's done an excellent job in preparing this ordinance. He's done much of the heavy lifting on the ordinance, and I think what you'll find is we've got a very, I think, well-founded, reasonable ordinance in place here. I just wanted to, recognize his contribution here. Oh, thank you. So what is a donation drop-off box? It's as you see on the screen. You see these in the community. Typically, the capacity is up to 6 cubic yards, which is what you see there. It's a storage unit. It's used by both charitable organizations or for-profit organizations. And sometimes that's not always discernible in the community. You might have a for-profit organization that's collecting donations, and they might return a portion of the proceeds to a charity of their choice. The donation items that are collected vary. Typically, you see books, toys. I guess I don't see too many toys. Books, shoes, newspapers, and clothes. Where are these boxes located? In most cases, they're located in commercial areas, commercial shopping centers. But I will note that I have seen them on locations like churches. I have seen some examples there, maybe a lodge. So some of these non-residential uses in a residential district, you will see some of those occurrences. So what are we not talking about? And I just wanted to clarify real quickly, this is a facility that's in the city of Surprise. It's what we call in the zoning code a recycling collection facility. It's a larger facility, usually run by a city that collects different types of recyclable materials that are then sent off for processing. In our code, we identify that as a collection facility. We allow them in industrial zones. I just wanted to make a distinction that that's not what we're talking about tonight, and the ordinance does not affect that use. Why amend the ordinance? As I mentioned earlier, the zoning ordinance is currently silent. And what I mean by that is we don't have any regulations today for donation bins. But this unrestricted environment has led to a broader conversation about some of the results of what could occur in an unrestricted environment. Now, that's not to say that bin operators are all irresponsible. That's not the case. Many act quite responsibly. However, there are those cases where they're not acting in the best interest of the city. And some of the concerns that have popped up relative to bins, I think we've seen increasingly a proliferation of bins, not just in the city of Peoria, but throughout the valley and other communities. You've seen more bins that are being placed out in the site. And sometimes, like you see in the photo in the corner, there has been some illegal dumping that occurs around the bins. Also, sometimes the bins are not located in the best locations. They might impact the community appearance, the community aesthetics of a site, and we want to be able to deal with that. And then finally, this issue with accountability. Who is responsible for the bin? And if we have an issue, do we have a mechanism to get in contact quickly and resolve issues quickly with respect to the issue? Now, you might recall this issue came up a couple of years ago. We had some dumping. The photo you see in the upper right-hand corner was Peoria and 83rd and Lake Pleasant. We had some concerns with that dumping activity. There was a public hearing we had one night, and this was a topic of that discussion. And in that discussion, the council voiced their concern about having an unrestricted environment and voiced their interest in staff coming forward with an ordinance that addresses that situation. So it's a council directive that we got. When we started the ordinance preparation, we looked at some broader objectives. So what are we trying to do? Now, what we're not trying to do is we're not trying to chase bin operators out of town. We're not trying to eviscerate the industry, okay? We're also not trying to pick winners and losers. And what I mean by that is if a bin operator is for-profit or not-for-profit, that's not really something that we're looking at. We're looking at the impacts of the bin, the physical impacts and the impacts upon a site. That's really what's of interest to us, and that's what we're trying to address. So we're trying to have, basically identify some reasonable measures to control some of these impacts, and most importantly, have a local contact and have a means to quickly address issues should they arise. So in the amendment preparation, obviously, one of the first things we do is, what does a local landscape look like? What I have for you on the right, this is a photo you see in the blue rectangle, or the blue square rather. That's the Peoria City Hall campus. And we're showing you really just a 6 square mile area around it, northern to Cactus. I sent Rick out in the field to identify, how many bins are we talking about and who are the bin providers. And just, this is a snapshot in time about a year ago, but I think he identified 30 bins in a 6 square mile area. Now, reflecting on how big the city is, we're about 180 square miles. So there are certainly quite a few more bins out there. The next step was to review literature and codes. What are other cities? How are they addressing the issue? We put together a staff working group. That working group included not only the city attorney's office, but also code enforcement. And we've worked very closely with those two entities throughout the process. Obviously, it's very important that we have an ordinance that is not only defensible, but is something that we can enforce. It's enforceable. So once we identified who the bin industry were and some of the stakeholders, we prepared two stakeholder meetings. The first one occurred on February 27th. The purpose of that meeting was to simply lay out the issue that this was an initiative that we were pursuing and to look at, identify issues and potential resolution to those issues. And we had a great turnout. We had probably had about 30 people representing various bin providers and others at the meeting. We had a subsequent meeting in September, and in that meeting, the purpose was to unfurl our first draft of the amendment and get their initial reaction on that. We also reached out to other organizations like Valley Partnership. They represent commercial interests, shopping centers. Not only was the draft distributed to their memberships, but also while they do not comment from an official perspective, they were very pleased and supportive of our endeavor to address donation bins. So I'm going to transition now and start talking about the ordinance. So just broadly, the four aspects of our ordinance: site placement and aesthetics, how are we going to deal with authorization and accountability, what is the regulatory process we're going to put in place, and how are we going to enforce this ordinance. In terms of where these bins could be located, the way our ordinance is structured, they would be permitted in commercial zones. And they would also be permitted in residential zones with respect to a non-residential use. And if you'll recall earlier, I mentioned that in some cases, like a church or a lodge, you might see donation bins in that perspective. So those are uses that are allowed in residential zones. The number of boxes permitted, we're trying to put in place reasonable standards. So if you're a site, you're within 0 to 1 acres, you'd be permitted a maximum of 1 bin, 1 to 3 acres, 2 bins, 3+ acres, 4 bins. And an interesting provision that we put in there as well is that for sites that are permitted to have more than 2 bins, you could not have more than 2 bins clustered together. Now the reason for that is, it's our perception that whenever you have an environment where you have more than a few bins clustered together, I think that provides a perception maybe to outsiders that this is a location that we want to bring our items, and maybe what could occur, what negative outcome could occur is there could be some dumping that occurs in that type of environment. So we want to limit how many can be clustered together, the opportunity to disperse the bins throughout the site. Okay, so the next few slides I'm going to talk about specific site placement restrictions. And so if you can just focus on what's in blue, I've got some slides that relate to that. So when placing a bin on the property, it could not be, rather, it must be on a paved surface. It could not be on an unpaved surface like you see in the photo. It cannot be within the front or corner side building setback. So if you look at the photo in the bottom right-hand corner, what we're trying to avoid is often you might have a scenario where you have a nice little landscape, streetscape, and then you've got a whole line of bins, and I think what that does is it detracts from the appearance of that streetscape. So we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to say if you have bins, move it off the street, internalize it within the site, and that's what that's trying to address. Others, Councilmember Leone, you might identify this picture when we were out. One of them is it cannot be located within required landscaping. That's a photo in Sun City where it is in a landscaped island. That could not occur in Peoria. It could also not occur within required parking areas. Now, I italicize the word requiring, and what I mean by that is that every use, based on the type of use, based on the square footage, has a certain parking requirement. If you have business X and you're required to have 100 spaces, and all they have is 100 spaces, they don't have any surplus parking, they could not have a bin because it would be taking up required parking. Also, if that business happened to have a surplus of 10 parking spots, they could have a bin because it would not take up the parking that they need pursuant to the code. Also, the bins could not be located, they could not obstruct drive aisles, they could not obstruct loading zones or fire lanes. The photo you see in the upper right-hand corner, that's a photo that we captured in Gilbert, actually, and you can see very plainly, you've got a bin that's located in a fire lane. You can see the red striping. It's also a loading zone. So it certainly could not be in that environment. It can also not obstruct right-of-ways or obstruct pedestrian ways. You've got a photo that shows the bin, blocking a sidewalk. That's certainly not what we want to see in Peoria. And then the all catching any other condition which threatens public safety and a number of things that could occur. We would not want to bin in that environment. All right, so the issue with authorization and accountability. In terms of box identification, the information needs to be readily available to the staff that enforce it. So this includes who is the bin organization, it includes what are we collecting here, and also, and I emphasize, a local contact number. We need to have local contact information placed on the bin. Again, if there's an issue, we need to be able to reach that bin operator very quickly to resolve issues. Finally, the approved temporary use permit, I'll talk about the process and amendment. That has to be clearly displayed on the bin, on the deposit face of the box. The ordinance language calls for 2-inch numbers with contrasting paint. Now, I understand you might have some testimony tonight that this might be a complicating issue about the expense of using paint. There's a process where you got to burn it onto the actual box, and I think it costs about $400. From our perspective, we're interested in the temporary use permit number being visible, and we're interested in it surviving any weatherization that we might have. So if there's another method to do that, if it's letters that the operator would have to get from a Home Depot or Lowe's and affixed to this box, I think that'd be okay. If it's a permit number that we provide through a card with our logo and it gets laminated and affixed, I think that'd be okay as well. The point is, what we're trying to do is make sure it's visible and make sure that it survives weatherization. Also, in terms of pickup and maintenance, the bin has to be firmly closing with a locking lid. The contents would have to be collected at least weekly. Now, this was a provision that was introduced by our Planning Commission. So certainly, if you're a box operator that you have lots of activity at the site, the expectation would be that you visit the site as often as necessary, because we do not want to have any materials out around the bin, but at least, or no less than at least weekly. And also to keep the bin in good condition. Some of the performance standards or the expectations that we've put in place here. What happens if the box is vandalized or damaged? The ordinance says that it has to be repaired or removed within 5 business days of discovery or notification. So notification from the city that you have something wrong with your bin, you have 5 days to correct the problem. Or if you have graffiti on the box, or if there is dumping that occurs, items left outside the box, that has to be removed within 24 hours of discovery or notification, whichever is less. So that has to be taken care of very quickly. What we've devised in terms of process is we're recommending a temporary use permit process. Now, a temporary use permit is a case type we already have that generally we use for things like Christmas tree lots, pumpkin, carnivals, things like that. But we would require each individual box throughout the city to get a temporary use permit through my department. temporary use permit process. It's an administrative process. It's a pretty nominal fee, as you can see on the screen. As these TUPs come in, we would maintain a GIS layer, a computer layer rather, and a spreadsheet of where these boxes are located. And we would also require that the box be renewed annually. In terms of enforcement, this ordinance does strengthen existing enforcement mechanisms. Now, if we have a circumstance where a bin is chronically not in compliance, or we have an operator that is not responsive to our request, now we always have the ability to revoke the TUP. If something's not being met, we always have that ability to do that. Also, when we're reviewing a TUP and we're making a decision on whether to grant it or whether to deny a TUP, we have the discretion in the ordinance that we can look at past experiences with this bin operator or with this location. Whether we discover that some of the information is fraudulent on the application, whether we have a history of recurring notices of violation, or a past revocation. Those might be circumstances that would enable the staff to authorize some discretion in whether to grant or deny that permit. And finally, with any box in violation, we already have a process in place today, and then I'm speaking particularly of the dumping issue, to deal with that, and we deal with that under existing nuisance provisions in the code. It's basically a process that already lays out, contact from our code enforcement division, already lays out a process in which we engage the bin operator. I think what this ordinance will do is it will enable the ability to solve problems quicker, because we will have a local contact, we will have information regarding that bin. I think we can have enforcement occur quicker than we would normally have it. Finally, the item did go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We started first with a study session that occurred on October 16th. We explained the ordinance to the Planning Commission. One of the directives that they gave us was to include language I mentioned earlier about requiring removals of the contents at least weekly, so that was incorporated in the ordinance. And then we had a public hearing on November 11th, 2014. We did have 4 speakers at the Planning Commission. 2 were representatives of bin operators, 1 was a citizen, and 1 was a representative of Goodwill. Speakers overall were generally in support of the ordinance. However, the bin representatives were very concerned about notarization. I'll talk about that in a minute, just make a mental footnote of that issue. But by a 5-to-1 vote, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they did recommend approval of the ordinance to council. The additions that they provided was they softened the language a little bit in that if there's individual site noncompliance, it could result in a business license revocation instead of the automatic shall. So there's some discretion that they've provided to staff to use our judgment and how we want to go on that issue. And then secondly, the Planning Commission felt strongly that the language, the written authorization that we require should be notarized. So that was their recommendation. I will point out that even though it was a 5-1 vote, the commission, all of them generally were in support of the ordinance. The dissenting commissioner was not in support of the notarization component of the recommendation. All right, so let's talk about the notarization issue that appears to be the seminal issue here in front of us. Let's start with what the city currently requires in its land use applications. So when I say land use applications, what am I talking about? I'm talking about all the things that come through my department, things like rezones, conditional use permits, site plans, and temporary use permits. On each application that we have, we do in fact require the owner or whatever legal entity is authorized to act on their behalf, we require that they sign the application. And when they sign the application, if it's the authorized agent, they are essentially attesting and certifying that they are the duly and lawfully appointed agent of the property and they have the authority to speak on the owner's behalf. That's currently already in our application procedures. What we do not currently have is we do not require our signatures on applications to be notarized. That's not a current requirement. So what does the notarization provide? It provides, when somebody provides their signature and they go to a notary public, and that notary public looks at that, the notary public confirms that the identity of the signature is in fact that person. That's what they do. They confirm that that's who they are, they say they are. What they do not do is they do not confirm that the person signing the document is in fact the owner or the legal entity authorized to act in that capacity. That's not part of what the notarization provides. So in that regard, as we were looking at this issue, we did ask the city attorney's office, provide us with an opinion if it's a legal necessity to provide the kinds of assurances that we're seeking in this debate. We do have a memo. It's attached as Exhibit 2 in your staff report. But essentially, what they do is the answer to that question was no. It's not legally necessary. What they do point us to is an existing statute in Arizona Revised Statutes called unsworn falsification. And what it says is if a person makes a statement that he believes to be false on a material issue to a public servant in connection with an application, that's already a Class 2 misdemeanor. That's a criminal statute that's provided. We already have remedies under the existing statute to address that issue. So when we look at the notarization issues, we of course did have proponents of notarization to the application. So what were they looking at? They believe that it provides additional protection for the owner against trespass and unauthorized bins or boxes that may occur on the property. They've argued that the notarization, in fact, shifts that burden of proof to the bin industry and rather than the staff. Opponents of notarization, which primarily it's been the drop-off box industry, a couple dimensions to their opposition. One is, I mentioned earlier that we don't currently require it with any of our land use applications. They do not feel it's fair to be singled out just temporary use permits that deal with donation bins, just to single out their industry for additional scrutiny. They think that's an unfair treatment under our ordinance. They also believe it will severely harm the industry, and by that I mean they cited the difficulty of getting an owner to sign a document and notarize a document, particularly if it's a larger property that might have an out-of-state interest. Maybe it's a trust and it's several levels deep. Maybe it's a multinational. So it's difficult to get that. And what they've cited is that that's just another obstacle, and that may move some ownerships to not want to entertain bins on their property. And they think the belief is that will severely impact their industry. So that's the debate that's unfolding. What I have here, I'm not expecting you to be able to read that or see that, but what I am suggesting is, however we proceed on this notarization issue, whether it's notarization or whether we decide that we don't need to proceed with notarization, just understand that we are putting together a temporary use permit application. We've strengthened some of the language there so that when a person signs that application, we make it very clear, what they're signing, what their responsibility is, and what the level of responsibility is that's inherent in that signature. We will also probably point to the unsworn falsification statute that I mentioned so that it's very clear when you sign this application, you're taking on a big responsibility. So that's something that whether we pursue notarization or not, we are going to have that on our application. Okay, so I mentioned that the ordinance went in front of the Planning Commission in November. Here we are in April. Some time has transpired. Part of that was, just the transition of a new council and then finding an appropriate date to bring this item to play. So with idle hands, of course, we always looking at ways to tweak the ordinance, to strengthen it a little bit. So we have introduced some staff, I'll call them refinements to the ordinance. And I'll just briefly outline what they are. We've for the interest of clarity, we've added a definition of what a complex or center is. We've clarified that, in fact, we want the local contact number on the bin. We make it very clear in the ordinance. We've also clarified that boxes that are not in compliance with the ordinance, the enforcement mechanism would be pursuant to our current nuisance statute in Chapter 17 in our city code. So we wanted to point it to an existing mechanism that we already have in the city code. We also supplemented the language that, again, if there's prior revocation, if there's fraudulent information, that could be grounds for us to exercise discretion on whether to approve or deny a TUP. We've clarified how the TUP number is to be displayed on the box. Again, I mentioned earlier, 2-inch high letters, contrasting paint, or maybe another mechanism to do that. In the last bullet point, we had a bin operator that came to us very late. Actually, they came to us after Planning Commission proceedings, and I'm not sure why they weren't involved, but they did not, they happened to have a larger bin. Now, I mentioned that the standard size is up to 6 cubic yards. They happen to have a larger type of bin, and I think if you look at the photo, you can see the larger bin next to the standard bin. And so what we've done is we've added language that if you have a larger bin, it will allow you to go up to 12 cubic yards, but just note it's going to count as 2 bins. So if you have 2 bins that are allowed in the site and you want to put a larger bin, that's it, site's done. We're done with that then. So before I move on to the recommendation and the findings, let me just talk real quickly on this slide about next steps. So if the council chose tonight to enact new bin regulations, how would this unfold? Of course, the ordinance would become effective within 30 days of the signature of the mayor. The planning department, as we are the department that would take in the TUPs, we would start accepting applications on day 31 or whatever the first business day after that period would be. In advance of that, we would publish that date on the website. We would publish that on the TUP application. What I'm anticipating is a rush of TUP applications on day one. I think we're going to get that. And so for those bins that may be, after we get these applications in and after sites become exhausted, there might be some bins out there that would not comply under the ordinance. We understand that there's existing arrangements in place and that there's arrangements that need to be made to move the bins. So we've put in place in the ordinance what we're calling a grace period. And the grace period would be till the end of 2015 for those boxes that don't have a TUP to come into compliance with the code. Give them a reasonable amount of time to comply with the ordinance. Now, in terms of key staff findings, again, I mentioned currently the situation today, unrestricted. We don't have any code requirements. This unrestricted environment has led to issues, and I've talked about a few of those tonight. The city council, a past city council, has directed staff to address issues surrounding bins, and we believe the proposed ordinance in front of you is an improvement to the zoning code and does introduce reasonable standards that we can protect the public health, safety, and welfare. With that, I want to point to the recommendation, and I just want to say I apologize if there was any confusion in your packet about the two versions of the ordinance out there. Maybe I can simplify it a little bit in this way. The first recommendation is if you want to approve it as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We believe it's our duty to transmit the recommendation that they passed to you in its form. Or the other option would be to approve as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and including the staff refinements that I talked about. So looking at it simply, it's either the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation without the staff refinements or the one with the staff refinements. Now, obviously, we'd rather see the staff refinements. We think they're good. But as we're looking at this issue, I just wanted to reflect on the notarization issue. Again, when we looked at the process, when we brought it to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the staff, it was not part of our recommendation to include notarization. The Planning and Zoning Commission saw otherwise. So if the council desires not to include notarization, just know that you would have to include that as part of your motion. But however we want to go with the city, the staff, we're willing to implement whatever it is you desire. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions for Mr. Hawkes? Mr. Patena?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, if a bin operator is constantly in noncompliance and you revoke his TUP and he refuses to move the box, has the city made any provisions to be able to remove it?
Mayor Carla, Councilmember Patena, I think the city would have the option under its nuisance code to have that bin removed. They have an existing contract apparently with the towing company. They could have the towing company remove that, and then the bin provider would be responsible then for getting that bin back from the towing company and paying that fee. That's one aspect of it. But we think with this ordinance, with the registration, with the local contact, we don't think we'll get to that point. Anecdotally, we've talked to some of our partners cities that have implemented this, and they have not. We have not heard of any bins being removed. Usually, what the case is that you get compliance pretty quickly in that process.
Okay. My second question is if, regarding notarization, if say a shopping center owner is out of state and you can't get it notarized, any approval to notarize, does that mean that they cannot put any bins on his or her property until that occurs?
Councilmember Patena, if there is a entity that is legally authorized to act on behalf of the owner, that entity could sign the application, and depending on how we go this evening, if it's notarization, they would require to get that signature notarized for the authorized agent.
Councilmember Leone?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, is that $100 for each bin per year?
Councilmember Leone, that is correct. Now, the way our existing fee structure works is if you're a for-profit entity, it's $100. That's what our TUP provides for. If you're a not-for-profit entity and you can certify that, then it's 10% of the fee, so it'd be a $10 fee for those those folks.
I like this whole setup that you just had. It's great. I like the site restriction. You got one bin per acre, and I like that, 2 bins for 3 acres, and that's great. You and I went for a ride along, and we saw bins on top of landscaping, and side by side, looks like a tin soldier standing there,
Right.
and pretty well banged up. And it doesn't look good for the city of Peoria, and especially the shopping center. I drove into the shopping center, not making any names of the shopping center, but I saw about a 55-inch TV just thrown there, broken with the glass. And, kids can pick that glass up and get hurt. So my concern was, I wish the people would realize if it says clothes, you put clothes in. If it says shoes, you put shoes in. I came across one that had a big box of books and furniture. And, you can bring them to the Goodwill, or you can bring them to a donation place. There's a lot of them around Peoria and Sun City. Excuse me. And I think that's where they should go, if they're going to go. And instead of just throwing them out there and letting people pick them up and get hurt. Who's going to do the enforcement? Is it code that's going to do the enforcement if we have to?
Councilmember Leone, enforcement really is a partnership between my department, because we would handle the TUP, we would be approving or denying it, and then the code enforcement department.
And I like the statement of authorization. That's good. The whole thing that you put up here, the whole plan is good with me. I support that, because I think something has to be done. I didn't know you had to have a permit, and I didn't know we didn't have any permits until now, so that's another good thing that's coming up. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt?
Like Carlo, I guess I just didn't realize that these bins are all interlopers. They had no permission to be on private property, any of them, and of course that was because we didn't require that. And I applaud that we are getting an ordinance now. Just a couple questions, and you might have covered this, Chris, and I just didn't get it. Does it need to say specifically on the bin, if I'm going to put something in a bin, which trust me, I never will, but if I were going to, I would want to know and be assured that if it says for children of American veterans, for example, I want to know that's where it's going. So is there a way in this, is there a requirement in this that what they say on the bin, or I've seen bins that don't say anything, they just say donate. Are they going to have to say, and there are some legitimate bin operators, I get that, but are they all going to have to say who I'm donating to? And then is there a way to know that that's a real corporation or a real entity?
Councilmember Hunt, that's not a requirement as part of that ordinance. As I understand, though, because I've heard discussion in other forums from bin operators, that I believe, and Steve, I don't know if you can answer that, I believe it's a state statute that...
Councilmember Hunt, members of the council, the answer to that is no. We really don't, the city does not have the authority to involve itself in the operations of a not-for-profit and to guarantee that that not-for-profit is complying with the rules regarding their tax status. That not-for-profit might well be misusing that, and it could be a violation of their tax status, but that's far beyond the city's jurisdiction. And it's not something that the planning department has any legal authority to do.
And am I understanding that it's a $10 fee for a not-for-profit and a $100 fee for a for-profit? And then do we have any way of knowing if they are indeed a not-for-profit?
Councilmember Hunt, if they are not-for-profit, they would have to submit the appropriate paperwork certifying that they are that they're a 501c3.
And then most of the bins I've seen are occupying parking spaces. So if this is where they want to place their bins, do they have to attach some kind of document from the Home Depot or whoever it would be, that has so many parking spaces that shows that they do indeed have 5 extra or 10 extra parking spaces?
Councilmember Hunt, the answer to that question is when they submit the TUP, we're going to have various items that they have to submit with that. One of those requirements is going to be a site plan, and they have to identify the parking area, the use there, the square footage, and so that we can go through that exercise that we can see if they in fact have available parking to do that.
Okay. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I have a question for you. So you're talking about code enforcement. So somebody calls in and said, you've got trash piled up around this thing, and I mean trash. I've got pictures in my book. I've been out circling the community for several weeks looking at these bins, and the one that's closest to my house, 5 recycle bins, or 5 bins in the Goodwill parking lots, okay, and 7 mattresses stacked up on top right next to these bins. So what's the enforcement? So somebody makes a phone call to code enforcement, you guys go out there, walk me through the process.
Councilmember Edwards, so one of the things we pointed to in the ordinance is we pointed to Chapter 17 nuisance process, and there's a process that's attached to that chapter, and whether it's, forget about whether having a bin ordinance, if there's dumping that occurs, whether there's weeds, whether there's other circumstances, there's a process that unfolds out there. I might have to ask Mr. Jack Stroud to come down and maybe he can identify what that process is.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Jack Stroud, the Code Enforcement Supervisor. Yes, we already do have the process in place through Chapter 17, the nuisance code, and it would fall under the same situation. We give them a notification, but now we're afforded the opportunity. We actually have a point of contact on the bin, and we have a point of contact with the owner of the property. So we actually have 2 options. We'll give notice to both and resolve it through that process.
And what's your time frame? So say the trash continues to pile up, you've notified them. What's the time frame that,
Our typical
30-day notification that they have to respond to get the stuff taken away? Or what I'm trying to figure out is how long does this stuff sit there, and how long, time over time, does it continue to pile up before something's done with the material?
Councilman Edwards, the normal process, what we do typically with Chapter 17, we give the notification, and it's a 7-day notice. That's the first notice. And if they don't comply within that 7 days, we'll give them a second notice, which is a final notice, and that's a 7-day process also. And if they don't comply, then we'll issue a citation.
And in the meantime, it still sits there, correct?
Yes, sir, it does
Okay.
still sit there.
So the property owner, his hands are tied at this point? I mean, this is his property.
No, his hands aren't tied. We're going to be dealing with the property owner just like we're going to be dealing with the bin operator. We're going to put the responsibility on both.
On the property owner?
Yes, sir.
So the property owner, at any time within the notification that you've sent to the bin operator, he can do what with this material since it's on his property?
Yes, sir. Maybe I wasn't clear. We're going to give notices to both the property owner and the bin owner. So we're going to start the process giving a 7-day notice to the bin owner and the property owner.
Okay, so
to
the
comply
property
with it.
owner gets the notice at the same time that the bin operator does, and he immediately says, I don't want this bin on my property any longer. Does he have any say in immediately or within a few days taking that bin and having it with its contents removed off of his property?
I'll let Steve
Let me
answer
address
that
that. Councilmember Edwards, members of the council, the answer is that would be a private matter between the property owner. Generally, the property owner may or may not have a contract. If they have a contract, that'd be governed by the terms of the contract. If not, the bin is on the property, the legal term is it's in the property at sufferance of the property owner, basically meaning that the moment the property owner chooses to withdraw their consent, the property owner can essentially say to the bin owner, remove your bin, or you're trespassing on my property, and I can remove it for you. That would be a civil matter between the property owner and the bin owner. What the city would be doing in terms of its actions, if the bin owner failed to comply and allow these types of conditions, the city could undertake a revocation of the temporary use permit, and then the city would also have the ability, under the nuisance ordinance, that if we thought the condition was emergent enough, to remove the bin at city expense and hold on to the bin until the property owner paid all the necessary fees and requirements to recover the bin.
It's a lot of talk. And in the meantime, it continues to pile up and pile up and pile up, correct?
The answer is certainly that could be a problem. Now, the city, the 7-day notice is something that we could certainly look at a shorter notice for that, unless we want to, I mean, it's part of changing the code or whatever.
Councilmember Edwards, if I can offer some additional comment to that. So we do have a process in place already through Chapter 17, and Jack described that, but let me recall you back to what the ordinance says. We create a performance center and expectation. If you have dumping and it's a registered bin, the expectation is that those items be cleared within 24 hours. If it's not, and we're having an issue with getting it cleaned up quickly, it's recurring, we have the ability to revoke the permit.
Okay, so bring back your slides of your bins. Well, you've got a better picture than that, because I know I have a better picture than that.
You know, it's probably the front. It's one of the first ones, okay. That one.
There you go. So you're telling me that all accumulated within 24 hours?
What I'm suggesting, Mr. Edwards, is, you know, we have a means to contact them, you know, because we'll have that on the bin, if they're a registered bin, and they know that because they signed the permit, they have to clear up within 24 hours. If they don't, you know, and they can't act quickly, and they can't meet that, we have every ability to revoke that permit. And again, when we consider other cases with that bin operator, that might be justification to not grant that permit.
I just think there needs to be a little more teeth to your ordinance to let the property owner be able to take that merchandise off of his property quicker than going through the normal channels.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Hunt? You did. Do you not want to speak? Okay, Mr. Leone.
Yeah, the question I get, what if those bins don't have no information who to contact? If somebody goes by and slaps some paint on them so you can't read the phone number or something, what do we do then?
Councilmember Leone, if it's a registered bin, they got a permit through us, it's their responsibility to make sure that a TUP number is clearly displayed. If for some reason something happens to that number, they have to reapply it, but they have to clearly display it. If that's something that's brought to our attention or noticed, then we would certainly contact the bin operator to get that change enacted.
What if, how long, like that top picture there, how long do you leave that there before they get it cleaned up? I mean, is it a day, 2 days, a week?
Councilman Leone, I think there's two dimensions to that answer. There's the existing mechanism that we have in the nuisance abatement statute that Jack Stroud spoke of, where we provide notice and there's contact. But again, I'm also speaking to the expectations that we've set out in the ordinance. We expect that those situations, upon notification, we've contacted the bin operator, they have to be cleaned up within 24 hours. If they don't, and again, they're not responsive or it's recurring, there could be some ramifications, meaning we may choose to revoke the permit or not grant future permits to that bin operator entity.
So if that's in a shopping center, say like maybe Safeway or Fry's, and you see something like that, and you go in the store and tell the manager about it, you know, he should get it cleaned up as soon as possible, shouldn't he?
Councilmember Leone, again, if it's a registered bin, there are two mechanisms. We're going to have local contact information on the bin. We're also going to know who the owner is, so we can use both those avenues to try to gain compliance quickly to that, because we'll have that information. That hasn't always been the case today. In fact, sometimes, you know, in the early part of the process, when we would call some of these numbers, we didn't always get a return, you know, an answer to the end of that phone message. We're going to have local contact information on the phone so that we get who's responsible for that bin.
That looks pretty messy. And I would hope if anybody's watching this tonight on TV, I would hope they would either bring it to the Goodwill or bring it someplace and put in the boxes what goes in the boxes. You know, I see them and they say shoes, clothes and shoes, books, stuff like that. Put them in instead of putting them on the ground. I tell you, I saw one place that had 3 bags, and I just got out of the car, see what was in those bags. You wouldn't believe what I saw in there. Grass. Someone cut the grass and just put in those big plastic bags and just threw them there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Finn.
This is actually for you, Jack. Nice to meet you, by the way. I know we've
Oh,
talked
glad
on
to
the
meet you,
phone, so it's nice to
Councilman.
put a face to the name. I'll be laying awake tonight, not if I don't ask this question. So if you look at this picture right here, it looks like it's got 4 bins, and 2 of them are from the same vendor or what have you. Let's assume that there were 4 different. Who's responsible for that mess, and who do you call?
Councilman Finn, under this situation here, I think we would notify all the bin owners.
That wouldn't, just a follow-up question, that wouldn't extend the 7 days, or that they have, somebody's got to step up and clean that up within the 7 days?
Excuse me, when we typically give the notice, the 7-day notice, the first notice, we give them 7 days. We expect them, according to the new ordinance, to clean it up within 24 hours.
So you'd call all 4, if that was 4 different bins, you'd call all 4 of them?
Yes.
Okay.
And Councilmember Finn, too, with the new ordinance, we're not going to have more than 2 clustered together in that circumstance. So it'll be one
Good
of 2
point.
that, we won't have more than 2 clustered together.
Yep, good point, so it'd be 2. Thank you, I can sleep tonight, appreciate it.
Mayor Carlett?
Youth Council Liaison Hout.
How come the time is way too long? 17 days? Oh, I think you said 17. But a week, so they get 2 chances, you said, to pick it up?
Michael, normally what we do, the first notice we give is a 7-day notice, and it's typically given with all code violations, all nuisance codes. And council at one time has approved that. Out-of-state owners or property owners, we actually give them 10 days because they don't live in the state, but the 7 days we give to local. The first notice usually it completes or complies with the violation. They clear everything up, but we do go with the second notice just for a second in case they weren't home or they were on vacation.
Okay.
Mayor Carlett, can I come in? I'd like to get back to a question that Vice Mayor Edwards asked with respect to enforcement that I don't think was completely answered, and that is there something we can do to provide more teeth or greater enforcement with respect to cleaning up the kinds of messes we see in the picture on the screen? And I think that is an issue that the city attorney can and should address in terms of what we might do.
Mayor, Council, there's really, I'd say, there's actually 3 parallel enforcement processes here, and we have kind of sort of, I think, gotten focused on just a traditional code violation. First, these bins are, as I said, on the property at the sufferance of the private property owner. Independent of the city code, independent of the TUP, they exist on that property at the sufferance of that property owner. If that property owner decides that the condition is unsatisfactory, the fact that the city gives a TUP to that bin doesn't mean it stays there. They're on the property at the sufferance of the private property owner. Now that is a contract issue between 2 people that the city can't address. We can't interfere with that. Separately, they have to, under this ordinance, have a TUP, a temporary use permit, from the city. What this ordinance provides is that if they're in violation, that the city can revoke that temporary use permit within 24 hours after the violation. What that means is they're now an unpermitted box. The city then can address that unpermitted box in a number of ways. We can address it through the traditional code process, which would be a notice of violation. We could address that box even if it's a permitted box through the traditional code process. In many cases, it may be more of an emergency hazard because it may be blocking parking, it may be interfering with access. There's no requirement to give a notice of violation or anything for an emergency hazard. We can simply go in and abate it and deal with it. This is going to be something that the code staff, we deal with this all the time with code, that there will be some conditions that will be emergent and will need to be abated more quickly. There will be some where it may be a minor violation, and we would give that kind of notice. But I think the answer is, within 24 hours after a violation, if it's still in violation, the TUP can be revoked, and at that point, it's an unpermitted box. And if necessary, and we have someone who has repeated violations, many of these entities have boxes all over the city, and they're not going to want to lose their right to have other boxes. So you really have, I'd say, 3 different parallel processes, a private process, and at least 2 city processes that we're able to address this with. And I don't think that if this was to be passed, that you're going to see extended periods of what you see in that top picture. And certainly as a city attorney, I'm going to do my best to make sure that you don't see that.
Thank you. Ms. Hunt, did you have further comments?
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that this is not acceptable is an understatement. But Jack, with all due respect, and we've had this discussion before, first of all, are code compliance officers going to be proactive on this? Because we know that the rest of our code is pretty much complaint-driven. And we can say it's not, but it is. We all get complaints from people who think nothing was done because it's 7 days, and then 7 days, and then they do a little bit of something and they get off the hook, and then they do it again. It's another 7 days. It goes on. And I'm just kind of getting heartburn over the fact that I see this becoming that. You guys have a long city to patrol. And I don't know. Are you going to be, is that written in? Is that a code issue that's separate? And I'd like to also suggest that we review our city code at a different time, obviously. I think 7 days plus 7 days is way too long. If I've got garbage in my front yard, I don't need 7 days to get it out of there, and I certainly don't need an extension. So that I know is a different issue, but I guess I still have to wait and see if this is going to work with all we're still working with people here, and we're working with, he was supposed to report it. No, you were supposed to report it. Well, I thought code was going to take care of it. Well, I called code and they didn't respond. I can hear it now. So I think something, Chris, I'll just address it to you or Jack, needs to be really proactive on this. Otherwise, I don't see it as being all that big a deal. We've got so many loopholes here. Who's going to go and check and make sure that the phone numbers are indeed phone numbers? Nobody's going to do that until it comes time to call one. I mean, is somebody going to do that, Chris?
Councilmember Hunt, when we get a TUP application, one of the things that the staff's going to do, we're going to call the number. We're going to make sure it's a real number and that
Okay.
it's a real entity that we're dealing with.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that's all. I don't feel good about the enforcement on this.
Okay, thank you. I declare this public hearing open, and we have a number of speaker request forms. I'm going to start with Suzanne Stacy. Would you please come down to the podium and give us your name and address, please, for the record? Give us your name and address, please, for the record. Yes, to the podium right here. And you'll see the time start up here in that monitor. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Thanks. Mayor and council members, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Suzanne Stacy, and I represent Bosom Buddies of Arizona. And we are a local 501(c)(3) We've been here since 1982, grassroots. We actually have a support group right here in Peoria. In the city of Peoria, we have 4 donation boxes. I think the biggest thing for me is to let you know that when you see bosom buddies, we are here. You can come to our meetings, you can come to our, even our board of directors meetings. We just want to let you know that we're here and we're transparent. The way that we have functioned is we have permission from every single partner is what we call them. It's our reputation. It's important to us because we're here for you. And we want you to know that there's certain aspects that are concerning to us, and that's the notarization aspect. Not that we wouldn't do it, because we are doing it, but we're a very small organization. It's very tasking. It can take me 3 to 6 months sometimes. So I guess just take into consideration the small guys out there that don't have the staff to be able to go out and do all of that's needed. We would, and we do, but we just want you to consider those folks that are, really doing the right thing and are good character, and just keep us in mind when it comes to the decision-making process. So, but I thank you for the regulation because it's very needed, and I've been in agreement with all of them. So I just wanted to speak to that and say my piece and let you know that we are good characters out there. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker request form is for Kristen Green. Please state your name and address for the record, and your time is up there in the corner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kristen Green. I work with the firm of Malera Alvarez, and I'm here representing American Textile Recycling Services. They are one of the bin operators here in Maricopa County, and we do have bins here in your city. I want to say that, as has been said in previous meetings this evening, it is rare for those of us in government relations to actually agree with everything that is in an ordinance, and we are very grateful to your staff for putting together an ordinance that I personally have used as a model in other parts of the country, actually. We are in complete support of the staff recommendations, and that goes back to the notarization issue. That is the only issue that our company in this industry has a concern with. And as Chris pointed out, as your planning director pointed out, you have so many different manners in which to show that we are submitting true and real owner authorization permit applications. I won't go into all of them, you saw that. One of the things that we're simply asking is, this is the first time that we've been asked to come to the city and submit applications to you, and we're asking that we be given the same respect that others that have been asked to come to you for use permits, that we get the same respect, which is to presume that we're going to be truthful on our applications as everyone else is, and not require us to have that extra level of scrutiny until and unless there's a reason for it. And up until now, we haven't had reason because we haven't given you any reason to think that we'd be dishonest. Other than that, as I said, we are very supportive of your regulations. Staff can attest to the fact that the first version we actually didn't feel was strong enough. It was our industry and our company in particular that asked for some of those more stringent requirements, such as the 24-hour to remove graffiti or anything outside. And Councilmember Leone, I should tell you that if we could figure out a way to make sure that folks only drop off what we ask them to drop off in our boxes, we would love to know what they are, because believe me, we're the ones who have to sort through it. So if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Robert Hasty?
Mayor, council members, thank you very much. My name is Robert Hasty, 10115 East Bell Road in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I represent Community Works of Arizona. And we do have a few boxes in, Peoria. Been to 3 meetings today. And we work with property owners, and we've got about a 13-page contract that is renewable every year. It has a site plan. So, we work stringently with them to do that. We're in agreement with ordinance. I do have to give accolades to the city of Peoria. They've done a very phenomenal job of very detailed in their research as well as their presentation. I am the box that is of a larger capacity, and so I would ask that you would give some consideration, please, for that, because if we had to rebuild our boxes, honestly, it would be something that we wouldn't be able to do in the city of Peoria or any city. Some of the language that was presented was drafted out of Phoenix as well in the box, and so those are the accommodations that were made there, and we did the same presentation for Surprise as well, and we will with each city that we work with. So I just ask that you would take that into consideration, but we do support staff in their recommendation of number 2. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Jim Mapstead.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Jim Mapstead, and I represent an organization called Stop Donation Bin Blight, 8837 North Central Avenue in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you for allowing me the time to address the council on behalf of my organization, express my support for the City of Peoria's proposed regulation of donation drop boxes. First, I applaud Peoria for taking on this challenge. It's an important issue to me as a small business owner and neighborhood leader that people's property rights are protected from unwanted blight. As a past City of Phoenix Planning Commissioner, I work closely with Phoenix on its donation bin ordinance. Since then, other cities have begun the process of regulating bin blight, with Peoria leading the way, and some best practices have begun to take shape. One such best practice that we've seen in other ordinances is protecting property owners' rights. I believe a strong text amendment should allow a property owner to remove unauthorized bins from his or her property or revoke the bin permit for any reason, which gives both the city and the property owner the ability to keep our neighborhoods free from blight. One of our concerns is that the proliferation of boxes over the last few years, if we were to take a step back 5 years ago to take a look at how many drop boxes were in our communities, one can only imagine how many more will be here 5 years from now. So I applaud you for taking this necessary step to get regulations under control. Councilmember Hunt, you expressed a concern about the amount of donations given to some of the, some are charities and some are for bogus entities, quite frankly. And I would argue that I'm also board chair of Local First Arizona as well, and we support and promote locally owned businesses here in our communities. I would argue that the percentage amount of donations that for-profit corporations, which most of these bin operators are, donate to nonprofits is no different than the rest of us as business owners give as a percentage of our revenues. But the big distinction is I don't create blight in my neighborhoods by donating to the nonprofits that I support. Again, I thank the council for your leadership and strongly recommend approval of the donation bin text amendment with the protection of owners' property rights included. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Benjamin Graff.
Mayor, Council, Benjamin Graff with the law firm of Withy Morris, 2525 East Arizona Biltmore Circle in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm here representing Goodwill of Central Arizona, as well as multiple commercial property owners throughout the valley who we represent that frankly are sick and tired of having unauthorized donation bins dropped off in their property. I did prepare some slides of pictures that I wanted to share, but there's a lot of important issues that came up. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to flash through these. We can go back to any of them that you desire, but some of the things that you've seen already. And let me get to some of the core issues right off the bat. Notarization, big issue tonight, but I think a very simple answer. As of tonight, notarization has been included in every single city's ordinance that has approved a Dropbox ordinance for a couple reasons. One is notarization. There was a slide that said what it doesn't. Here's what it does do. Ben Graff, as a property owner, if you require notarization, I will never walk into the city of Peoria, ask why there's a Dropbox on my property, and be handed a document that's on City of Peoria letterhead that has my signature forged on it. That will never happen if you guarantee and require notarization. Here's another food for thought. The Dropbox companies right now are monitoring the cities throughout the valley. They're trying to pay attention to what and which city has the weakest ordinance. Where should they go once all the cities regulate us? I don't think, from my opinion, you want to be the only city that doesn't require notarization. And there was a comment that it's an additional step. You bet it is. It is an additional step to ensure truth and veracity in the process. I've made a list of the things that we believe a good Dropbox ordinance includes. At this point, including notarization, your ordinance includes all of these except for the second bullet point. We really believe there needs to be stronger language in your ordinance, and I hope the council can consider some stronger language tonight that specifically protects property owner rights, that specifically allows a property owner to remove the box and doesn't turn this ordinance into something that a Dropbox operator can hold up and use against the property owner, saying that they've gained some kind of right through the city of Peoria. Lastly, and if you'll bear with me, there's a lot of good debate and discussions tonight, and this is just written as I've been looking and listening to some of these concerns. But if you'll look at paragraph 15 of the staff refinements and the Planning Commission recommendation, you'll see that number 15 originally had a first sentence that was recommended to you by the Planning Commission. That sentence said, "This ordinance authorizes the city to remove and dispose of any drop-off box, including its contents, which is unauthorized, unpermitted, or is an otherwise violation of this ordinance." Something that seems to be missing, would it be possible if I could have 30 additional seconds?
Yes.
That would be fantastic. One thing that is missing is a discussion of what happens to a box that is fully unpermitted, fully unauthorized. We've seen 14 of these boxes on a Goodwill property, not a single one with property owner permission. How do any of those boxes gain the right and the respect of the city of Peoria to receive a 7-day notice, a 14-day notice, a 30-day process? They don't. They have gained no rights to the city because they are fully unauthorized. So if you'll allow me to read into the record, I have briefly rewritten section 15 in a manner that I think will address all the concerns. This ordinance authorizes the city to immediately remove and dispose of any drop-off box, including its contents, which is unauthorized, unpermitted, or does not display a permit number. So that first sentence makes you have the ability to immediately remove blight if it's associated with a box that's simply unauthorized. Second sentence, any donation, recycling, drop-off box, including its contents, which is determined to be in violation of this ordinance, shall be deemed a public nuisance as defined in Chapter 17 nuisances, of the Peoria City Code, and may be removed pursuant to those provisions. So now you have a bifurcation of process. If someone does have a permit, then I would agree that they've gained some additional due process rights, and maybe they can be handled through the nuisance ordinance that gives permission. But if they are unauthorized, the language that I just read into the record would allow immediate removal of the blight, so you don't have couches and boxes sitting there for many, many seconds, many, many years, many, many times, months at a time. So I appreciate going over the time. I can reread that into the record if it's something you're interested in including. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Graff. And Joel Moyes.
Good evening. My name is Joel Moyes, and I am at 7600 North 16th Street in Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members for having me tonight. I'm going to be brief because a lot of my comments would echo some of the comments of the folks that have been here tonight. I'm a commercial property owner in the Metro Valley. I own about 1.5 million square feet of retail shopping centers throughout the southwestern United States. I'm also the ICSC State Director. That's the International Council of Shopping Centers, pretty much the preeminent shopping center industry trade organization with 68,000 members worldwide. However, tonight I'm here as a private property citizen. Within my partnerships, we own shopping centers. We're not some nameless, faceless private equity out of some ivory tower in New York. We're here, we're local. I built my businesses in Arizona, and I would urge the council to pass this legislation because people tend to forget that shopping centers are indeed private property. They're open for public business, but they're not public property. These bins are directly abusing my private property rights. Last year, the city of Phoenix joined a growing list of communities across the country in adopting an ordinance to clean up the bins. Today, there's over 7,000 bins in the Phoenix metro area. Some say that a few bad apples spoil the bunch, and unfortunately, through experience, I can tell you as a property owner that there are more bad apples in this industry, unfortunately, than there are good ones. The good news is tonight, you're hearing from the good ones. The folks that are here tonight that are in support or speaking on behalf of the ordinance are here certainly trying to do the right thing and honor our communities. The reality is that a lot of the bin operators, they misrepresent their business model to appear to be charitable organizations when they're in fact for-profit organizations. Sometimes they return no or as small as 5% of the profits to charitable organizations. And I would estimate that if any of their reviews were on charitynavigator.org, they would receive very, very low reviews for transparency. The worst transgression is that these bad apples really tarnish the mission and reputations of the folks that you've heard from tonight that represent the quality operators in the industry. You know, the bins are dropped without permission for commercial property owners without our consent. I had one particularly in Mesa, dropped overnight, totally unpermitted, without permission. It took us weeks. It took my property manager literally weeks to get the bin owner on the phone. When we finally got the bin owner on the phone and had it removed, guess what they did? They moved it across the street to another shopping center, literally across the street. And I am certain that they didn't go through any process with that property owner to move that bin. In Phoenix, you've seen photos that this leads to unsightly refuse pileup. They're dangerous situations sometimes that cause right-of-way issues. Some other unintended or unexamined consequences. We've talked about parking ratios that violate perhaps the shopping center owner rights, other private property rights. It costs us money to remove these bins. We're looking for teeth from municipalities to help us be good neighbors as shopping center owners. So, you know, what I would strongly recommend is 2 additions to the amendment tonight. I am strongly in favor of adding the notarization clause for a number of different reasons. I've seen unscrupulous operators submit things that are really not true. So I think that adds a level of accountability that really forces someone to publicly lie and put themselves in a really libelous situation. I really do applaud the council and certainly your P&Z and Planning and Development Services divisions within the city of Peoria for taking this on. Because they have a history, these bin operators have a history of trespassing. You know, imagine if you would for a moment as a private property owner if one of these bins were placed in your front yard. And I'm saying this because it's how I feel. When this happens on our shopping centers, you know, we're doing everything we can to manage these centers in a best-in-class condition, and we don't get, oftentimes in other municipalities, the support that we'd really love to have. To speak to your comment earlier, Vice Mayor, about, you know, what are the rights of, you know, 7-day period, we as property owners have the right to remove anything on our property, and we will. What this gives us is a little extra teeth for some of these operators that have dropped stuff off, who actually call us and claim that they've gone through some public process, for us to refute that information in a respectful way and honor the good folks that are here tonight that actually do go through the right process. So, you know, I support, obviously, private property owner rights. I would ask that you put in a clause that gives us the right to revoke the permit, and obviously add the notarization clause. And I know I've ran long. Thank you very much, Mayor and Vice Mayor and council members. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else, members of the public, who would like to address this issue? Okay, seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing. Any further comments from council? Ms. Hunt.
Wait.
Chris, that was the first time that I had heard, I don't remember who said it, that every other city around here has the organization part, and I was not aware of that. And I know you guys must have studied other ordinances.
Councilmember Hunt, I guess I would take exception with that comment. We did provide an exhibit in your staff report, Exhibit 1, where we looked at those cities, mostly in Arizona, that had a bin ordinance, and many, of course, do not. Tucson does not have notarization. Scottsdale does not. Goodyear does not have a notarization requirement. Gilbert does not. So I would take exception with that statement. Phoenix does. And Surprise is considering it too.
They're going to, or
Correct.
are they still
I think the
deciding?
current version, yes.
Then my second question, frankly, I'm not concerned at all about how difficult it is for a bin owner to get, the harder it is, the better. Does it put an undue layer for your folks? Because I understand, as I understand it, I should say, if we do it for these, we have to then do it for every you know, the bake sale on the corner or everything. Does that put in your opinion, is that unfair to do it to all these others?
Councilmember Hunt, to answer the first question, no, I don't think that puts an additional burden on staff time, because again, it's up to the bin operator to go out and get that signature notarized, so that would not put a burden on us.
But I mean for all the other temporary use.
Right, I think we would want to step back and assess all our permits, probably want to treat them all uniformly, so we would probably look to implement that with the rest of the permit types that we have.
And also, I'll ask you this, do you feel that this significant to add the notarization? Does this significantly increase the teeth in this ordinance?
Councilmember Hunt, as we mentioned, it was not part of our staff recommendation. We did not, I mean, I'm hearing comments tonight, but we did not see it as a necessary objective. We thought we had existing protections under the state statute. But certainly if that's the will of the council, that's certainly what we will implement, though.
Councilmember Leone.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, is that, you told me one time they're going to put,
I'm sorry.
am I okay?
You're fine. Excuse me.
You was going to put the Peoria City seal on all the boxes. Are you going to still do that?
Councilmember Leone, the way the language reads in the ordinance is we would require the TUP number to be displayed on the box.
So you're going to put them on?
Correct.
Okay. Now, does these shopping malls, wherever these boxes are, do they charge to put your bins there? They don't charge any money, just can drop them off?
Councilmember Leone, the city, as part of a TUP, we would require a permit fee with it. Now, whether the property owner, requires compensation from that, that's a private matter that they would have to enter into a contract if they want to do that. But from the city's perspective, we would require either a $100 or $10 permit fee.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I just think we have too many boxes all around Peoria. We want to try and keep Peoria nice and clean. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the donation recycle bin drop-off zoning ordinance text amendment as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission, along with the staff recommendations with the following amendments. And Chris, is it possible for you to put the text amendment up?
Yeah, could we go to the other PowerPoint, please? Okay, so intuitively, I think you're talking about, okay, so it's beyond the presentation. I think that's the language you were.
I was looking for bullet.
Pardon me?
Staff recommendations.
The staff recommendation.
Staff recommendation, which
number
is
one.
right here, item 2, with the refinements.
Yes. Can you actually bring it up, or do you want me to read what I want you to change?
Can you bring up the staff recommendations?
Oh, sure.
The actual
The staff
verbiage.
refinements?
The actual verbiage.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so these are the staff no, you're acting for the
Okay, let me
specific ordinance?
Let me just read it to you.
Okay.
How's that? You gonna write this down, or how do you? So on section 14-3-14, number 1, donation/recycling drop-off boxes are subject to the issuance of a business license and approval of a temporary use permit pursuant to Article 14-39, and upon receipt of notarized written authorization by the property owner or authorized agent. Okay? I want to add some verbiage there. And I want to add, an authorized agent must provide the city with written evidence that he or she is approved by the property owner to authorize a temporary use permit on the property.
So Vice Mayor Edwards, so the first part of what you read is in the recommended version. The second part of the language would be additional language.
Additional language, that's correct.
Okay, can I interrupt? Mr. Kemp, do you have a comment about this?
I'm just trying to think of how this practically will work, because the notarization requirement is certainly a council policy the written authorization, I'm assuming that what we're going to now have to be doing is requiring a copy of the bin contract between the property owner and the individual. And it's, quite honestly, from my standpoint as the lawyer who's ultimately responsible enforcing here, it seems a bit repetitive in the sense of we're going to have the permit application, we're going to have the notarization, and I mean, certainly if council wants to require a copy of the bin contract, you can do that. I don't know, I can't tell you as a lawyer that adds anything to my ability to enforce it.
What I'm concerned about is the fact that a bin operator goes into the store, talks to the store manager, and the store manager says, yeah, go ahead and do it. That store manager is not the property owner, and doesn't have the written authorization to place that bin on the property. That's why I want to put a little more teeth to this to say that it has to be an authorized agent. You have to have written evidence on file.
Vice Mayor Edwards, members of the council, certainly that's a council prerogative. Now, to use that example, if a store manager did that and that store manager submitted a temporary use permit, I don't think we would not be prepared to accept that, because obviously the store manager wouldn't be able to indicate that they had any kind of authority. If a person says, I'm store manager, they're not the manager of a shopping center, they're not the manager of a plaza, and so they would not be a person who would be authorized to file the permit. But certainly if council wishes to add that, you could. I just need to tell you as the lawyer, I don't think it adds anything to our enforcement ability.
I'm going to go ahead and, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that last sentence in, and then I have one more change, and then we can call for a vote on that.
Okay.
Correct? So then on 14-3-15, I want to add another paragraph, which is actually, would be paragraph 16, I believe. And so that basically says that the property owner shall control the permit, not the permittee. As such, the owner of the authorized agent may rescind their authorization for the donation/recycling drop-off box at any time, and the permit shall be revoked. The property owner shall have the right to remove the unwanted donation bin drop-off box, inclusive of its contents, from the property at any time. So. Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure it's on the record, so.
Okay, so what we're looking at right now in section 14.3.14, 16 shows what you are reflecting here.
Yeah.
Correct? So it's already there. Okay.
It's not all there, correct.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to add those two sentences. One
Correct.
is the one regarding the property owner, and the second one is
The authorization.
authorization.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilmember Hunt. Is there any other comments?
I just have one, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know, this just keeps, it's like the Energizer Bunny, it just keeps going on and on. I just have a little bit of a concern of throwing in language in without really giving staff an opportunity to kind of vet it, and we're making a decision very, very quickly on an additional language. So I personally have some concerns about it. I support everything that we've talked about tonight. And if I would struggle voting on something without really vetting it through legal and staff and getting some additional eyes on that. John, I'm not discounting what you're saying, or I think it's great. I just would struggle doing that just at the drop of a hat, adding language without really looking through it, because we are changing some important things here. So that's just my comment.
Okay. So having said that, do we have any additional comments from staff with regards to this motion?
Mayor Carlott and members of the council. So the language you see on the screen, this was language that was offered by one of the representatives of interest, and this was language that we looked at some time ago as a staff, and we looked at it with our legal department, and we didn't believe that it was necessary to add it to the ordinance. We believe that, and Steve, you can talk more to this, but we believe under common law and under existing provisions that those rights are already afforded to owners, and so at the time, we didn't feel it was necessary to include that as part of the ordinance.
Mr. Kemp, do you have any further comments?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, to follow up what Mr. Harker said, we already have provisions within the city code where we can revoke permits. We certainly, again, this, we can certainly look at this in terms of the comments submitted by one of the members of the public. The staff recommendation that was ultimately made was reviewed by my office. We are satisfied that the staff recommendation does meet the goals that were set forth in terms of being able to address these boxes. Certainly, if council would like us to look at this provision or craft this provision in a way that it would give council even more comfort, we can certainly do that. As the lawyer, I would say that if you want to address these boxes, the only way to do that is to pass something, because we don't have anything on the books right now. So the fact that you pass something doesn't mean that we can't go back to the commission with additional amendments and additional changes.
Councilmember Binsbacher?
Yes, am I understanding correctly that if they're not in compliance, and you revoke the permit, then the property owner can remove everything immediately?
Councilmember Binsbacher, that's correct.
So that language then creates that situation where it can be removed immediately. And that also puts the property owner in a position of strength to take control of the situation and clear that from their property. Is that correct?
Councilmember Binsbacher, we believe we already have, that the owner already has the ability to do that. We already have those protections in there.
As it's written?
Correct. That's why we didn't feel it necessary to include that as part of the revised draft.
Okay, that's how I'm understanding it. I think you all did a great job. I do support all of the comments and concerns. I would like to see us approve this as it's written and get it in the works, give it an opportunity to work for us, to work for the nonprofit organizations, to work for the property owners, and then maybe address it, the additional language, and potentially call for a revision.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Edwards?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so Chris, what you're seeing in front of you, or what we're seeing in front of us, number 16, that is not part of your original document, is that correct?
Vice Mayor Edwards, the language you see on the screen here, while it was proposed by an entity, is not part of the draft that, as recommended the Planning Commission with our refinements.
So again, I state my request to have this added to the document.
Okay, so are you revising your motion?
No, I'm keeping my motion as it was to, well, I think to add the authorization agent with written evidence, and then adding this new language here, number 16.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. So would the council please vote? It passes with one decline, and that is Bridget Binsbacher. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is call to the public on non-agenda items. If you wish to address the City Council, complete a speaker request form and return it to the clerk. I have not received any, so we will move on to reports from City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Carlett. We have just two brief reports under my report this evening, and both of them will be addressed by our Community Services Director, John Sefton. John?
Thank you, Carl, and good evening, Mayor and Council, and it's certainly my pleasure to announce our couple of upcoming events. The City of Peoria, as well as the Peoria Unified School District, have teamed up for the third annual Peoria Arts and Cultural Festival to be held Saturday, April 11th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the downtown area, all of our venues will come alive, from the Osuna Park, the Peoria Center for Performing Arts, the Peoria Historical Museums, the Community Center, and the surrounding streets will all come alive for this special event. Admission is free, so we invite everybody to come down and see the extraordinary artwork, dance performances, theater routines, as well as choir and band performances on 6 different stages throughout the city. Theater Works will also be on site with their performances and offering 45-minute workshops for youth and teens. We'll have a special art project created to celebrate specifically the 125th anniversary of the Peoria Unified School District. In addition, the Peoria Police Department and POSD are teaming up with a special art competition emphasizing the theme of anti-bullying. Youth will also enjoy kid zones and inflatables, free face painting, character artists, and more. Some of the activities will require a nominal fee, so bring your dollar bills. And of course, new this year, very exciting, Peoria Arts and Cultural Festival is putting the chair into charity, literally. The city of Peoria is calling all artists to paint a chair and create a unique piece to auction off. And all of these funds through the auction will go to the Peoria Education Foundation. So again, that's this Saturday, April 11th from 8 to 4 in the downtown Peoria beautiful area. Thank you. And our next event, because we have enough to do in April as we did in March, the city of Peoria is throwing a party for the planet throughout the month of April. In recognition of Earth Day, volunteers are invited to come out and clean up trash and debris along the New River Trail system. All volunteers will meet at the Antigua Clothing Outlet located at 16651 North 84th Avenue in Peoria, and that's Saturday, April 18th, starting at 7 a.m. Be nice and cool. We want everybody to come around and wrap things up by 10 o'clock. Last year, we had over 250 volunteers come out and help us clean up tons and tons of debris. We'll hit over 100 acres throughout our trail system. And again, this is all based upon the volunteerism from our community. Throughout the month of April, we're also sponsoring bulk trash cleanups, neighborhood pride projects, household hazardous waste collection, Operation Pill Drop-Off, and environmental workshops. And one of the unique things, and from last week's council goal session, our edibles demonstration garden right out here at City Hall will be planted. You can check the site right now and see how we've done some contouring and water harvesting areas. So it's all coming together for our first edibles garden here at City Hall. So again, the Party for the Planet will be Saturday, April 18th, starting at 7 a.m. right over at Antigua. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to reports from City Council. Youth Council Liaison Helt.
Hello, Mayor and Council. This last week, I had the honor to lead the Pledge of Allegiance at the State of the City address. It was very nerve-wracking. Yes, in front of all those people. I do not know how you do it. It's insane. That's all I got.
Thank you. Councilmember Leone.
Trying to find the mic to push the button. Thank you, Mayor. On March the 21st, I went to it's called One for the Water, 4 mile. It's a run, and City Prayer puts this on every year, and it's more or less tells you how to save water and watch out for the leaks. I know Bill Madley made a big speech on that, how to save water. You know, you check the toilets and check the irrigation sprinklers. If there's a leak, you should get it fixed because you're paying for the water. Not only that, but we should be saving water. So this is the thing, and they have this every year. So if you didn't get a chance to run it this year, go down there and run it next year. I know in the finance department they had 3 or 4 runners there. It was just great to see them out there running. On March the 21st again, at 11 o'clock, I think it was, I went to Habitat. Vicki and I were both there, and Vicki can probably tell you more about it, but it's always great to see these young families get a Habitat home. It's their first home, and you call it a starter home. But it's really great, and the people's name was the Vale family, and it was on, I believe, 83rd Avenue or 83rd Drive. But it's always great to see these new families get a home where, which they couldn't afford it before, so now they get a home and they can do many things with it. Also on March the 21st, under the P83 party, that was great. It's always great when they have this country music. They had the youth advisory group, had 7 bands, and I was one of the judges, and so was John Edwards. And we met with Ray Lynn and Casey James. And I don't know who they are, but I met with them. I guess they were country singers, and my granddaughters took pictures with them, and they enjoyed it. On March the 26th, the Budget Commission dinner and a show was great. Also, the great show every year for the volunteers. And, like we have, I guess they had 600 volunteers this year. So it's always great to show the appreciations for them. And hopefully next year, if you're not a volunteer, come on down and volunteer. I didn't volunteer this year. As the first year I missed, I think about 15, 20 years maybe. Also on March the 26th, we had Government Day for the students. Every year we have this, and the staff takes them all over the department to see and how they work. John Edwards and myself were the only council people there, and we took them all over City Hall and showed them how government works in the city of Peoria. It's always great to show these kids how Peoria works with city government. On March the 28th, we had a movie in the park at Scotland Yard Park. All the hot dogs and sodas, popcorn were all gone. I think we had about over 300 people. It was a great event, and mostly kids come down there, and they just love these cartoon movies. On March the 29th, we had a VIP Peoria Diamond Club team at the sports complex. It was great. We have this every year, and reception every year, and it turns out great. Bridget does a great job on all of these. April the 4th, I went to Dolly Sanchez Easter egg hunt at the sports complex. This is one of the biggest events that Peoria has, and took my 6 great grandkids down there, and I think they got more candy than they could give up, but they had a lot of candy. It was great. The Easter Bunny was great, and there was a lot of people there. I don't know how many you could say, but I'd say about 10, 20,000 maybe, and maybe John knows more about it than I do. On May the 30th, we're not there yet, we're going to have another Shred-a-thon. The one we had before was a great turnout. It was just terrific, and a lot of them had called me and said they had missed it. It was only for 2 hours, and that's all we're going to have this one for, and it's going to be at, I got it written down here someplace. The Shred-a-thon is coming up on Cheyenne Elementary School, and the date will be May 30th from 10 to 12. So if you missed it, the last one, come on at this one here and give rid of all those tax papers. And God bless each and every one of you, and God bless America. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Yes, well, it's been an exciting 2 weeks. In fact, so exciting, I'm glad for the recap, Carla, because I didn't even remember most of those activities, and I think I attended all of them, except I didn't do the 4-mile run either. Yes, welcome to the Vail family. I was at that. I love Habitat for Humanity. I love what they do. And this was an amazing family. They all are, but this was a wonderful young woman and her 2 adorable children, one of whom will definitely be on our youth advisory board. He was so amazing. It was my pleasure this week and my honor to represent Peoria in Atlanta at a preservation, Main Street Preservation Conference, and I learned so much. And one thing that I always learn is how much we do right here in the city of Peoria and how many things we are already doing so well. But I did get some new ideas, and I know you directors will be happy to know that I brought back more ideas for work. Anyway, it was amazing, and I missed everyone, so it's good to be back. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Finn?
Yep, I'll be very brief. I want to congratulate the Peoria Education Foundation for a great program that they put on. I know they raised a lot of money, which is a fantastic organization. I think they did a great job. Thank you and congratulations to Peoria for putting on the Les Mis. Well, you didn't put on the Les Mis play, but the thanks dinner for all of our volunteers. And Kathy Carlin, I thought your speech was fantastic at the State of the City. I thought you did a phenomenal job, and I thought it was a great event. So,
thank you.
That's all I have.
All right. Councilmember Binsbacher.
March was definitely a month for events, and I echo everyone, and they were all wonderful. And yes, the State of the City address was amazing. As the newest council member, I am thrilled to be here and getting to know all of the council and all of the staff, the city manager, deputy city managers, and directors, and meeting with all of you and learning and understanding from a whole new perspective how Peoria comes together. And as Vicki said, we do a lot of things right, and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Councilmember Patena.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing I know for sure is that the city of Peoria knows how to put on an event, and the Dolly Sanchez Easter egg hunt was no exception. I got there about 8:30, and the crowd was already very, very large, a huge family event, a lot of children, a lot of kids, and just having a lot of fun. There were bounce houses and horseback riding, food, vendors, crafts, just plenty of things to do. And as crowded as it was, the egg hunt itself was really very organized. So John, to you and to your staff, congratulations on another amazing event. I had the chance to attend the boards and commissions recognition dinner. It's a way that we thank all of our volunteers, and they were able to see a great show and have a good meal. And it was the event was pretty crowded. I also attended the State of the City. I thought our mayor knocked it out of the park. She has great vision for our city, and made me proud to be a council member in the city of Peoria. So great job, Mayor.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thanks. Vice Mayor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 18th of last month, I, along with John Sefton, had the unique opportunity to sit down with some council members from Buckeye and some of their staff members and start talking about how we came up with the idea of the youth liaison here on the dais. The Buckeye is very interested in wanting to replicate our efforts here. So this is very gratifying for myself, at least. It's a great opportunity to show the youth, not only Peoria, but now Buckeye and maybe Gilbert, and just build on what we've done here, or what we started here. And I hope in the future that all the cities on the west side will take on this endeavor. So again, John, thank you for helping me shed some light on some of the little idiosyncrasies that sometimes I'm not aware of, but staff obviously is painfully aware of how to, I want to make it happen, you guys actually go do it. So thank you for doing the inside work there. On the 21st, again, the P83 party, what a great event. I think you guys knocked it out of the park. The Youth Battle of the Bands was phenomenal. So some of the music was a little not to my taste, but, to each their own. But each band had a different vision, and what a great way to express their vision and their love of music with an opportunity for a recording opportunity. So that was great to see take place. Again, I attended the Youth Government Day and actually toured the sports complex with about 12 students and just kind of showed them what we've done and what Peoria's vision was, not only for the sports complex, but for the Avenue Shops at P83 area. So it gives them an opportunity of how government works. So it's just, sometimes they take for granted that it happens. Well, it doesn't just happen. It's a lot of work from staff and residents to make something happen. So it's a good opportunity for them to understand how government works. I attended your speech. All I can say is tremendous and awe-inspiring speech, and I look forward to working with you and with the goals that you set forth for us. And I too attended the Easter egg hunt, and we may end up having to find a bigger venue over the next couple of years if this grows to the way it's going. 9,000 people. I'm not sure what our capacity is, John, but 14,000 is our capacity there. So in a couple of years, we may have to maybe do a north and a south Sanchez Easter egg hunt. So just think about it. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you. And just to build upon our youth council liaisons, Ian Mullane, he was a featured speaker at the Peoria Education Foundation event, and he just delivered a remarkable story about overcoming challenges as a child, he and his family, to achieve a well-deserved acceptance into Harvard University. It was just an incredible story, and he delivered it so well. And also, I was honored to have Youth Council Liaison Helt lead the audience in the Pledge of Allegiance at the State of the City event last week, and he did an amazing job, so thank you very much. That was great. And that is all, and there being no further business, we are adjourned.